Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Wallace. I wanted to continue this video series just to kind of continue doing a little bit more with the timeline of the Haitian Revolution and hitting some of the nuts and bolts of the revolution so you can see some of the layout of the way it pans out. It has a great deal of causes and effects, and I think in your work as kind of working on the project, that's a good place to pursue some additional ideas, for example, differences or similarities between the Haitian Revolution and the American Revolution or the French Revolution, and ways that maybe societies like France or the United States influence the Haitian Revolution in ways the Haitian Revolution, influences those societies. So there's a lot more content than what I'm doing in this particular video, but I want to make sure that you have, in a sense, some of the timeline. And the last video ended with the role of Spain and Britain. This becomes really significant because what initially started out as a slave revolt, remember 90% of the population is enslaved, so you have these masses of enslaved persons revolting and really for years. So it does seem that they are on the edge of being successful. At the same time, there's a great deal happening in Europe. So the French Revolution had already started at this point, and the War of the First Coalition. So France is at war with Spain and Britain, and that's going to spill over into Haiti. But we also know that Spain and Britain both have interests in the Caribbean. So Spain dominates the other half of the island, San Domingo, and they're always going to be favorable to this idea of a slave uprising because maybe it would unseat French power, and that becomes very important to the Spanish, who are seeking, an end to French colonialism and any kind of economic lucrative, access they might have. We also see the British invading Saint-Domingue, especially in the southern and northern portions of the island. So kind of think the eastern portions of the island. And Britain also has colonies in the Caribbean. And so there's an interest in trying to stop a spread of a slave revolt to British possessions. Jamaica, for example, would be significant. And then you also have Britain is also seeking to squelch, French power. And so some of this is really about, kind of taking away any type of economic opportunities that France might have. And of course, England and Spain might be invested in seeking those, the colonies for themselves. Do note that the white planters are really aligned with the British. So that particular group will fight largely alongside the British. So what makes this civil slash foreign intervention, war really complicated is different groups of Haitians are going to line up, on different sides. So that's something to keep in mind. And we know that many enslaved persons will fight for the Spanish initially because the Spanish are really promising an end to slavery. We do see the National Assembly trying to reconcile what they're going to do in Saint-Domingue. They do now all of a sudden have a war with very few French forces against Britain, against Spain, and also against enslaved persons. So there is a decision. Some of this could be connected to the Enlightenment, but also some of this is strategic in a military sense to try to enable large masses of enslaved persons to fight for the French. There is a promise of freedom and emancipation. And this does have a big impact. One is we see slavery end in all of the French territories in the Caribbean. That's also going to include Martinique and Guadeloupe. So that's important. But we also see the switching of sides. So Toussaint Louverture and people who followed him start to switch sides and abandon Spanish military and go over toward the French. Toussaint Louverture had long seen himself as a Frenchman, had long attached himself to the French colony and wanted to ultimately pursue that. Now with the promise of emancipation, there seems to be kind of a connection, back to France, and this kind of moves a great number of people and ultimately will have an impact on pushing out the Spanish and the French. Toussaint will be named the commander of a Western province. He will bring a great deal of military skills and leadership. He, to some degree, is sometimes compared with George Washington in the United States, being somebody who's very recognizable as a strong military leader, as well as later a political one. But we see France gain control over the entirety of the colony, and little by little by little, we're going to see Toussaint Louverture create a space for some type of autonomy. We really don't see a declaration of independence in Haiti until after the death of Toussaint Louverture. So there is not quite yet independence. Toussaint Louverture will create a constitution for Haiti, but also continue Haiti underneath, the umbrella of France. So it's still a colony of France, but there is a great deal of decision making that Toussaint makes to give himself essentially some political power and to create some economic autonomy within the society of Haiti. There is a civil war at this time, and I think Morrison had asked in class, what is this and how does this happen? Some of this is connected to like this political vacuum and the rise of Toussaint Louverture as a political leader who's going to start making decisions on the ground for Haitians. This is rejected by some people, including Andre Regard, who has a great following in the southeastern part of Haiti. He is identified as like a free person of color. Great deal of his followers are free people of color. This is in some ways more of a class distinction and the way in which people kind of prioritize and wish to preserve privileges perhaps that they had prior to the Haitian Revolution. And maybe Toussaint Louverture really represents more of the masses of the enslaved persons who see themselves very differently and whose interests are how they can access maybe self-sustaining farms. Some of what we're going to see Andre Rigaud, really kind of combat Toussaint with is really they're fighting for political power. And this does create a civil war, one in which Toussaint Louverture will win. He will invade the southern part of Haiti and also invade the Spanish part of Haiti, Santo Domingo, and claim that for France. So we got kind of a extending island of, it's still Saint-Domingue, colony of France, but it becomes much larger under Toussaint Louverture. One thing to note about Toussaint Louverture's policies, note much of them are going to be focused on slavery. He wants an end to slavery. So that becomes a very significant part of Toussaint Louverture's beliefs, and he will put that in place formally in 1799 in a constitution. But he also does wish to have a return to the economic activity that existed earlier under Saint-Domingue. The economy is probably at this point like a sixth of what it was, and a lot of destruction of plantations, and slaves have largely not been in the fields to the same extent. So it's not that Toussaint Louverture calls for slavery, but wage labor that's largely to some degree forced labor on plantations, the same plantations that were growing sugar crops and coffee crops and things like that. And this is not met with like wide praise amongst many of the people who supported Toussaint Louverture. So this is a very controversial policy, and it does get implemented with a great deal of force, especially under the assistant of Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So this becomes an important part to note because within Saint-Domingue itself, there will be some criticism. At the same time that's happening, this growing concern about Toussaint Louverture's economic policy, we see the coup by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1799. And as a result of this, Louverture will create a constitution. Okay, so this constitution, I misstated it before. I said 1799. 1801, when the constitution goes about, it has a couple of components. It will never have slavery in Saint-Domingue. And this is significant because of the first society to really prevent discrimination by skin color. We don't see this happen in other societies in the Americas. Some societies as a result of what happens in Saint-Domingue. But the United States, for example, or Brazil, don't see an end to slavery until the 1860s and later. The other thing that comes through the Constitution is a very significant, almost like dictatorial role for Toussaint Louverture. He does become a governor for life. So it maybe to some degree kind of takes a note from the first consul of Napoleon, and he identifies himself with political, military dictatorship powers. And this is going to be resented by Napoleon. And throughout the island, there are also a great deal of rebellions that ensue against Toussaint Louverture, mostly from formerly enslaved persons who are seeking access to land and not wishing to be, part of a plantation economy. Um, as a result, Napoleon sends troops to Saint-Domingue. And really, Napoleon's goal is to upend the entire island, reinstitute slavery, disarm the masses, and bring the entirety of Saint-Domingue under French control. And a lot of historians would agree part of the land that today is described as the Louisiana Purchase, which France controls, it had been given to France from Spain. There's a great deal of, possibility perhaps that Napoleon is really seeking some type of dominant role for France in the Americas, and maybe Saint-Domingue is a part of that. When the forces that are French arrive, there becomes some challenges within the rebelling groups. Rebelling groups will oppose Napoleon. Toussaint Louverture will see the French as almost like a revolutionary army that are seeking to maintain his power, and through a variety of really distrustful, there's a trickery that brings Toussaint Louverture to the French side, and ultimately a fake meeting that's set up, and he is captured by the French. Some of this is helped with people within Haiti who are pushing Toussaint Louverture out. So some of those rebellions matter as well, and Napoleon's forces will capture Toussaint Louverture and bring him to Europe, where he dies within a year. The group of rebels who want to reclaim land and seek land becomes larger, and this group of rebels will fight with the French for years. Leclerc is widely believed to be bringing genocidal tactics. There becomes a belief that not only ending slavery is enough, but killing a great deal of the population that is rebelling. So this is a horrific kind of end to a war that is so destructive, and that destruction is going to be very significant to its legacy. A lot of the conflict, has traumatic effects for Saint-Domingue. By January 1st, Saint-Domingue has reduced the French, soldiers to very little. A lot of this is aided by the disease of yellow fever. French forces under Napoleon, Leclerc himself, will really fall to disease. In addition to that, the former enslaved persons really don't give up on this rebellion. So by 1804, Saint-Domingue is declared independent and renamed Haiti, usually spelled Hayti. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was a helper at first and then a competitor to Toussaint Louverture, is crowned as emperor. He also becomes essentially emperor for life. In some ways, he will be different than Toussaint Louverture. He has no interest in bringing back any kind of white planters or in kind of creating any space in society for French colonial connections. He really sees the idea of race becoming significant in terms of everyone in Haiti will like uniquely identify as black. And he's also going to be similar to Toussaint Louverture, and he also will see a pretty significant enforcement of a plantation agriculture system in an effort to draw some revenue for Haiti. And there is a rejection of French colonialism, but we'll see Haiti become recognized as a refuge for all enslaved persons. So there is almost a shout out for enslaved persons, fugitives, to make their way to Haiti. White and French foreigners do become purged, and some of this is done very violently, but slavery is not only eradicated, there does become a degree of economic policy that's based on, the enforcement of forced labor, again, for wages, and Dessalines does become the dictator. He is assassinated by some of his competitors in 1806.